Something unusual just happened inside the Vatican. Not a scandal. Not a resignation. Not a fiery press release. Just a letter. A letter from Pope Leo XIV, addressed to Cardinal Raymond Burke. But this letter, quiet, handwritten, and deeply personal, might be the start of something seismic. Because this isn't just about tradition. It's not even just about one man. It might be about the future direction of the Catholic Church. And the signs are already pointing toward a massive shift. One that could undo decades of division, or deepen them. Stay with us, because what we're about to uncover might be the most important letter written by a pope in years. In the middle of Rome's heavy summer heat, something sacred moved quietly through marble corridors. It wasn't a policy change. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't even publicly announced at first. It was a letter. Simple. Latin. Sealed. It came from the hand of Pope Leo XIV. And it was addressed to someone who, until recently, many assumed was being quietly pushed aside, Cardinal Raymond Burke. To the public, it looked like a polite Vatican tradition, the Pope congratulating a senior churchman on the anniversary of his priesthood. But those who know how Vatican politics work instantly saw something deeper. On June 17, 2025, Pope Leo personally signed a letter honoring Burke's 50 years of service as a priest. That alone was notable. Because over the past decade, Cardinal Burke has not exactly been in favor with the Vatican's top leadership. Under Pope Francis, Burke was often seen as a thorn in the side of modern church reforms. He was removed from key positions, sidelined. Some even whispered the word exile. And yet now, this letter arrives. And what makes it different is not just the fact that it was written, it's how it was written. Venerable brother, the letter begins. With warm, elevated language, Pope Leo praises Burke for his faithful and fruitful labor in the vineyard of the Lord. He thanks him not just for his service, but for his courage in defending the sacred traditions and canon law of Holy Mother Church. Then comes the line that stopped many observers in their tracks. May the Lord bless not only you, but also those who labor with you in the spirit of fidelity. It was a subtle phrase, easy to miss. But to many, it felt like a signal. Because those who labor with you is not just a flowery phrase. It could very well mean the growing community of traditional Catholics around the world, the very ones who felt alienated by recent Vatican policies. The response online was immediate. Some traditional Catholics were brought to tears. Others called it the miracle we've been praying for. Even moderate Catholics were stunned. Was Pope Leo extending an olive branch? And Burke himself? He didn't give a press conference. He didn't write a long essay. Instead, he posted just one simple sentence online. Praise be Jesus Christ. I am humbled by the words of His Holiness. It was dignified, quiet, even holy. But behind the scenes, everything was stirring. In the days that followed, Vatican journalists began to dig. And what they found added new depth to this moment. Sources confirmed that just days before the letter was sent, Pope Leo had invited Cardinal Burke to a private meeting. It wasn't announced. There were no cameras. But those present said the conversation was serious, and focused heavily on one topic: the future of the traditional Latin Mass. Now, for those outside the church hierarchy, this might sound like a minor liturgical preference. But to millions of Catholics, it represents a spiritual battleground. And in that meeting, Burke reportedly laid out his case clearly. The restrictions placed on the Latin Mass in recent years had not only caused pain, but had pushed away thousands of faithful. Catholics. He asked Pope Leo to consider reversing them. Why does the Latin Mass matter so much? Because for many Catholics, it isn't about nostalgia. It's about transcendence, silence, reverence. It's about participating in something ancient and eternal. But under Pope Francis, restrictions were placed on its celebration. Dioceses were told to limit access. Bishops required permission. Entire communities were uprooted. Some felt that the Mass they had built their lives around was suddenly being labeled as divisive. Burke was one of the strongest voices defending it. And now? It seems Pope Leo may be willing to revisit the issue. This letter, so short, so simple, has done what countless documents and speeches have failed to do. It has given traditional Catholics hope. Hope that their voice is no longer being ignored. Hope that their form of worship is not being dismissed as outdated. Hope that the Church may finally be on the brink of healing a painful divide. But before we jump to conclusions, we have to ask, why now? Why is Pope Leo choosing this moment to reach out? One clue may lie in Burke's influence in the conclave that elected Pope Leo. Multiple Vatican sources suggest Burke was among the cardinals who strongly supported Leo's candidacy. They say he believed Leo had both the humility and theological grounding to bridge the Church's growing divisions. If that's true, this letter might not be a surprise at all. It might be the fulfillment of a quiet promise, made in sacred confidence, and now beginning to unfold in plain sight. But it's not just about one letter. It's about what this letter represents. A turning point. A moment where a pope long thought to be neutral in the liturgy wars is suddenly showing a hand. Not by decree. Not by edict. But by personal gesture. And sometimes it's those gestures that mean the most. Because behind every policy, behind every theological debate, is something deeper. The hearts of the faithful. The people who've been praying for change. And now, for the first time in a long while, they sense it might be coming. This is just the beginning. In the next chapter, we'll look closer at Cardinal Burke's journey, his clashes, his convictions, and how his vision for the Church may now be shaping the Vatican's future from the inside out. What happens next might surprise everyone. Because this letter may not be the end of something. It might just be the beginning. To truly understand why this moment matters so much, we have to go back. Back to a time when Cardinal Burke's voice was not welcome in the Vatican halls. Back to when his vision of Catholic tradition seemed doomed to disappear. This is the story of a man who refused to be silenced, and how the Church may now be circling back to hear him out. For more than a decade, Cardinal Raymond Burke has been one of the most polarizing figures in the Catholic Church. To some, he's a symbol of unwavering fidelity to the Church's sacred traditions. To others, a controversial critic of modern reforms. His journey from Vatican insider to near outsider, and now possibly back to the center stage, is as dramatic as any church council. So who is Cardinal Burke, really? And why does Pope Leo's letter matter so much more than it seems? In 2007, Pope Benedict XVI issued Summorum Pontificum, a document that allowed greater freedom to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass. It was a moment of healing for many Catholics who felt spiritually homeless since the sweeping reforms of the Second Vatican Council. Cardinal Burke was one of its most enthusiastic defenders. He spoke passionately about the reverence, sacredness, and spiritual nourishment found in the old rite. He believed the Latin Mass wasn't a preference, but a living connection to the Church's history, saints, and martyrs. But then came 2021. Under Pope Francis, the document Traditionis Custodes was released. Its goal, to restrict and eventually phase out widespread use of the Latin Mass. The impact was immediate. Latin Mass communities around the world were forced to close. Permissions were revoked. Seminaries were told to stop training priests in the old rite. And just like that, the spiritual home of millions was taken away. A young mother in Kansas. "It's where my kids learn to love silence and the sacred." An elderly man in Paris. "I wept when I was told our Latin Mass would be cancelled. It felt like the death of something eternal." A seminarian in Lagos. "For us, it was never about division. It was about reverence." All of these voices, worldwide, pointed to one reality. The traditional Latin Mass is more than ritual. It's identity. It's belonging. And suddenly, it was in danger again. In the years that followed, Cardinal Burke became a consistent voice of dissent. He argued that Traditionis Custodes was not only pastorally harsh, but theologically misguided. He urged bishops to resist it. He called for dialogue. And he asked, again and again, for the Church to honor both forms of worship. But the Vatican grew colder. His official roles were removed. He was left off key committees. His access to the Pope narrowed. In some circles he was called divisive. In others, dangerous. But Burke kept going. He traveled. He spoke. He led Latin Mass pilgrimages to Rome. And slowly, his support grew. One by one, others began to echo his concerns. Cardinal Robert Sarah said, "We must not discard treasures that have sanctified generations." Bishop Athanasius Schneider declared, "Suppressing the old rite is not a solution. It is a wound to unity." Their voices may have once been considered fringe. But as restrictions spread, even moderate Catholics began asking, "Is the Church turning its back on its own heritage?" And then came June 2025. At the 60th anniversary of the Latin Mass Society in London, Cardinal Burke delivered a speech that many believe changed everything. He spoke not with anger, but with conviction. Not with protest, but with love. He revealed publicly, for the first time, that he had met privately with Pope Leo XIV. He said, "I asked the Holy Father to restore the dignity of a Mass that has nourished souls for centuries. I asked him to follow the wisdom of Pope Benedict XVI. I asked him, as a father, to listen." He then turned to the audience and said something even more telling. "I believe he heard me." That single moment changed the atmosphere. It was no longer just about defending the old rite. It became a matter of reconciliation. And Pope Leo's letter, arriving shortly after that speech, now looked like a response. The Pope's choice of words was no accident. "Gratias tibiago, pro tua fidelitate." I thank you for your fidelity. To those in Vatican diplomacy, that phrase carries weight. Fidelity is not mere loyalty, it's spiritual alignment. By writing this, Pope Leo was not just congratulating Cardinal Burke. He was affirming his place in the Church. Several insiders have noted that this kind of letter is rare. One said, "For a pope to write in Latin, personally, and to publish it, this is calculated. Not coldly, but pastorally." Another remarked, "Leo is building something. Slowly. Quietly. This is just the first move." But silence can be meaningful too. And so far, Pope Leo hasn't walked back the letter. He hasn't distanced himself from Burke's comments. If anything, he's let the message breathe. Traditional Catholics began to stir with renewed energy. Some called it a liturgical spring. Others saw it as a test. Will Pope Leo follow through? Is this the moment Benedict's vision is reborn? Or is it just another Vatican head fake? The world was watching. But more importantly, the Church was watching. And somewhere between tradition and reform, Pope Leo stood at a crossroads. Cardinal Burke's journey, from exile to influence, is a parable in itself. Of endurance, of faith, of spiritual courage. But this story isn't over. In fact, it's only just beginning. Because what Pope Leo chooses to do next, whether he listens, whether he acts, will shape the future of Catholic worship for generations to come. In Part 3, we'll pull back the curtain on the Vatican itself, where insiders say two sides are quietly forming, and the tension is rising. Whispers of reform, rumors of restoration, and one pope walking the tightrope between them. Don't miss what's coming. We've followed the letter. We've followed the man. But now it's time to follow the pressure. Because inside the Vatican, something is shifting. It's not loud. It's not public. But behind those ancient walls, two competing visions for the future of the Catholic Church are colliding. And Pope Leo XIV is caught directly between them. On one side, a group of clergy and advisors still committed to the reforms of Pope Francis. They believe the future of the Church is in openness, inclusion, and simplicity. They see the traditional Latin Mass as a relic of the past, something that creates more division than unity. On the other side, traditionalists. Some younger, some older, but all deeply passionate about restoring what they believe is the most sacred, timeless form of Catholic worship. They aren't just talking about aesthetics. They're talking about identity. A 24-year-old seminarian says, "When I attend the Latin Mass, I feel like I've entered eternity. It's not about the language, it's about the mystery." A mother of 5 adds, "The reverence teaches my children that God isn't casual. He's holy." This isn't fringe. It's growing. And now, even the Vatican knows it can't be ignored anymore. Observers have been analyzing Pope Leo's movements closely. He has yet to issue any official statement on the Latin Mass debate. But he's made gestures. They say Leo chooses silence carefully. That he listens more than he speaks. And that's why this letter to Cardinal Burke, after years of silence, has triggered such intense curiosity. Because gestures, not speeches, often speak loudest in the Vatican. One Vatican source revealed, "There's a tug-of-war happening. Two camps. One wants to keep restrictions tight. The other says let the people worship." The tension isn't new, but the stakes are. Because if Pope Leo lifts restrictions on the Latin Mass, he risks alienating those who support Pope Francis's vision. But if he does nothing, he risks disappointing a growing base of Catholics who see him as their last hope. This isn't about ritual anymore. This is about legacy. Pope Leo knows that every pope is eventually remembered for one big thing. For Pope John Paul II, it was confronting communism. For Pope Benedict, it was reconnecting the Church with its deeper roots. For Pope Francis, it was inclusivity and reform. Now, Pope Leo must decide. Will his legacy be continuity, or correction? Let's step back and trace the arc. 2007, Pope Benedict XVI issues Summorum Pontificum, granting freedom for the Latin Mass. 2021, Pope Francis issues Traditionis Custodes, reversing those freedoms. 2025, Pope Leo XIV enters the scene. Silent at first. Observing. And then a private meeting. A public letter. A soft gesture that signals something is about to change. In parts of Europe, Latin Mass communities have been quietly pushed underground. Priests worry they'll be reassigned. Bishops are afraid of Rome's reaction. But still, the Mass continues. They light the candles. They chant in Latin. And they wait. Wait for Rome to say, "You're not forgotten." Pope Leo's letter may have been the first sign that the waiting could be over. Cardinal Sarah said. This letter is more than kind. It's courageous. Bishop Schneider tweeted. A blessing to Burke's friends is a blessing to all who love the sacred. Even retired bishops who hadn't spoken publicly in years are now stepping forward, saying, the Church is listening again. And it's not just the old guard. Incredibly, the Latin Mass revival is young. Polls show that among Catholics under 30 who attend Mass weekly, interest in the traditional liturgy is higher than ever. One 18-year-old put it this way: I'm not trying to be rebellious. I'm trying to find God. And I find Him there. Pope Leo has likely seen these numbers. He knows this isn't just about nostalgia. It's about the future. Vatican watchers say Leo is deliberating, that he's taking his time. But time may not be on his side, because the Church is at a crossroads. And millions are looking to him, not just for theology, but for reconciliation. He can no longer afford to say nothing. The numbers tell a story. In many dioceses, modern liturgies are struggling to attract new faithful. Meanwhile, Latin Mass parishes are bursting at the seams, some doubling in size in just 2 years. What does this mean? It means people are hungry for depth, for reverence, for something sacred in a world that often feels disposable. And that hunger might be the very thing Pope Leo has been quietly discerning. Some say the Vatican is preparing for a new document, a kind of middle ground policy. One that doesn't repeal traditionis custodes, but softens its effects. It would allow more local bishops to grant permissions, and reintegrate traditional communities without strict oversight. Others say Leo is preparing for something bolder. A full return to Summorum Pontificum with new pastoral guidelines. Both paths carry risk. Both will upset someone. But only one will define Pope Leo's vision. This is not a war of styles. This is not incense versus guitars. This is about the soul of the Church. Is it a church of memory, or innovation? Of silence, or sound? Of mystery, or message? And Pope Leo is being asked to choose. The letter to Cardinal Burke was not loud. It didn't come with fanfare. But its echoes are now reverberating through every diocese. Because in that letter, Pope Leo may have revealed his heart. In Part 4, we'll confront the most difficult questions yet. Will Pope Leo act? Will he make the bold move? And what happens to the Church if he doesn't? This final part may be the most revealing of all. Because sometimes, the quietest decisions change everything. Pope Leo XIV's letter to Cardinal Burke has done more than stir emotions. It's exposed the fractures, the hopes, and the delicate tightrope the Pope now walks. For Catholics around the world, this moment feels like a breath held in suspense. Because what happens next could define not just Pope Leo's legacy, but the future of Catholic identity for decades to come. This is where prayer meets politics, where tradition meets tension, and where the Church must choose. Who are we becoming? The Catholic Church has always moved slowly, but it has never moved accidentally. Every decision carries echoes. Every gesture, especially from a pope, reverberates across the centuries. And now, all eyes are on one man. What will Pope Leo do? Option 1. He could maintain a cautious path. Issue gentle statements affirming tradition's value. Loosen a few restrictions. Reassure both sides. But make no bold declarations. That approach would preserve temporary peace, but risk leaving traditional Catholics in continued uncertainty, still feeling like second-class citizens in the Church they love. Option 2. Pope Leo could fully reinstate the freedoms of Summorum Pontificum. He could issue a new document affirming that the traditional Latin Mass is a permanent and sacred part of Catholic life, that it is not merely tolerated, but treasured. That move would be bold. It would instantly energize traditional communities. It would honor Pope Benedict's legacy. It would echo the very heart of Cardinal Burke's request. But it would come at a cost. Reformist bishops may push back, publicly. They may accuse Pope Leo of undoing progress, of favoring exclusion over inclusion. Some might even resist implementation altogether. The media would fan the flames. Pundits would declare division. The tension would rise. And yet, Pope Leo may understand something deeper. Sometimes, peace requires courage first. Because this isn't about ritual. It's about restoration. Restoring trust. Restoring reverence. Restoring the sense that what is holy should not be hidden. Pope Leo's letter may have seemed small. But in it he opened the door. Now, he must decide whether to walk through it. From every continent the message is clear. The Latin Mass is not dying. It is not divisive. It is alive. And for many, it's the only place they've ever truly encountered the sacred. One woman in Manila said, "I left the church for 10 years. I returned because of the Latin Mass. It brought me to my knees." A father in Chicago said, "It's not about being better. It's about being anchored. This liturgy raised my children to love God." The Latin Mass is not a museum piece. It's a spiritual home. And the people are waiting. For clarity. For leadership. For a pope who will tell them, "You are not forgotten." Burke has done his part. He spoke truthfully, but respectfully. He held the line even when exiled. He never abandoned the church. And now, Pope Leo has honored him. Not just with words, but with a quiet signal. "I see you. I hear you." But gestures must become action. Many now believe an official announcement is coming. Insiders say it may not repeal Traditionis Custodes. But it may transform it. Loosening diocesan restrictions. Allowing parishes to petition more easily. Even encouraging bishops to support traditional liturgy where it thrives. Others believe something even more dramatic is coming. A papal document reaffirming the coexistence of both liturgical forms. With clear language that protects the traditional Latin Mass. And those who love it. He has a choice. To delay. Or to decide. To pacify both sides. Or to lead them. And what he chooses next will determine more than liturgical policy. It will speak to the very heart of his papacy. Because this is about unity. Not artificial unity that silences dissent. But real unity, built on respect, memory, and shared love for God. And reverence is the bridge. Reverence for the mystery of the Eucharist. Reverence for the beauty of sacred tradition. Reverence for the soul of the Church. When Pope Leo wrote to Cardinal Burke, he began with 2 words. Venerable brother. It wasn't just formal. It was fraternal. It was a quiet embrace after years of distance. A moment that reminded the Church, we are still one family. Now, he must speak again. Not just to Burke. Not just to bishops. But to all Catholics. Those who feel forgotten. Those who feel uncertain. Those who are longing for something sacred, something whole. This is the Church. Young and old. Modern and traditional. Hurting but hopeful. And Pope Leo has the chance to lead not just with policy, but with love. What happens next? Only Pope Leo knows. But one thing is certain. This moment, sparked by one quiet letter, has already stirred a movement. It has awakened something sacred. And now, the Church waits. Pray for the Pope. Pray for the Church. Pray that reverence is restored, and unity is reborn.